This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode.
All right, welcome back, friends. Our guest with us today has been with us from the beginning, and that's exciting, and that's fun.
Yeah, and he is the only one, I think.
He's the only listener who's listened to all of the podcasts.
That's right.
Yeah. And we keep waiting for him to invoice us for his time.
Yeah,
but
true.
We don't have any money. The Daily Leader has no money, Mike, so you're going to be highly disappointed with you. Ship that. Well, yeah, this podcast is now over after a minute and 6 seconds. Well, guys, we're super, super excited for our guest today. I will let Taylor introduce him in just a moment. But first and foremost, a big thank you to each of you. We love you. We appreciate you. I want to remind you to subscribe, particularly on our YouTube channel. That's the place where you get to see our beautiful faces. You get to see Big Bertha back there in Taylor's screen where the wax melts are made by Ellery Mayco. So be sure to also speaking of Ellery May, check out the discount code in the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast, including I'm sure iHeartRadio has show notes too. You can find those there. And in addition to that, share. We've been saying to all of our listeners now, just keep your comments to yourself. Actually, especially the YouTube folks. We don't want to know what you think about these things. Just don't. Just don't use profanity. Don't tell us. Don't talk about my height.
I like the comments, Brad. I'm going to push back. I'm going to push
just
back. Just
like and share and keep your comments to yourself, folks. Anyway, without any further ado, Taylor, take it away and introduce our guest.
Man, that was a heck of an intro to the podcast. I think all those people on YouTube are sitting there. You just got a whole bunch of comments you didn't want, man. So, bringing it on yourself. That's pretty cool.
And Brian's comment will be especially interesting.
Yeah, my brother's always the first one to say, hey, I was first. That's his only comment on YouTube. It's just that he was first place. Man, this is super fun. So, I'm excited to bring Mike on for multiple reasons. Mike and I have been friends for getting closer to a couple years now. I don't know if he calls friends or tennis place associates, maybe would be the better word. We met, we'll get into the story more, but through an exercise community, it works out 5 a.m. multiple days a week, which I haven't gone to in a while. I'll blame that on my babies. And sweating and dying together at 5 a.m. and then actually playing tennis. And I taught this entire group of guys how to play tennis. They had no experience with it before. And I taught them all how to, actually it's the opposite. I never played tennis and they all helped me play tennis. And then I still am continuing to learn how to play. So, but the joke I have about Mike, I always say, hey, the first rule of Michael Christensen is there is no Michael Christensen. He's kind of like the Fight Club. He's in the cybersecurity space and can't always talk about all the things that he's doing. And so there's just kind of this mysterious aura that lives around Mike. He's, what was the Dos Equis commercials? Most interesting man in the world or whatever it is. That's Mike. I'm going to give his intro, but that's actually him. So no, these are some of the credentials and things that he's done and who he is. But really, if you're wondering who is Mike Christensen, did I sum that up pretty well, Mike, before I get into some of the onesie twosies?
I'm super interesting.
Self-declared super interesting. That's great. Yeah, man. No, I mean, honestly, so Mike, we're super glad to have you here. Man, few things to know about Mike. Mike, you are a husband, right? You're a father. How many kiddos do you have? Four. Mike is into all kinds of things. Sports is just one of them. He'd be a jack of all trades. He'd throw himself under the bus and says he's a master of none, but he is, however long he's played tennis. I know he's still mastering that, so that's not quite true. You graduated from Arizona State University with BS in Justice Studies, and then 2 years did your MDiv at Fuller, which I have heard of. A lot of time. I got a lot of ties with Fuller. Yeah. Oh, how did that happen? And then, man, your work, pretty cool, man. A lot in the technical sphere, starting, call center, increasing levels of support there, moving your way all the way up, working through network, servers, desktop. So anything tech side. I know in sales, and I'm excited to hear more about this, your product manager did a number of things, pre-sale support, your director of sales, and you kind of had a key approach to help that team, I think, increase by about 600%, which is not a small increase. So
just quickly, again, like if you could help us with our 600% sales increase, we would be more than happy to give you, I would say, 80% of that.
Yeah. Okay.
More if needs be.
We can have some conversations, a little consulting.
Yeah, we've got about 300 followers on YouTube right now and another 100 or so on other platforms, plus about 8,000 on Instagram. So carry the 1, carry the 2 times 6. That's a lot, Mike. You got your work cut out, man. But Michael Christensen, you are also an entrepreneur, ran your own business for a couple years, which is amazing. And you are a director of MSP, so director for a security and global software company, which I know, man, that is no small task in today's world. If you're paying attention, so we're in 2024. I don't know if you'll be listening to this next year, whenever you are. Cyber security, I think, is just an incredibly hot topic because there's plenty of people trying to undo people's security right now. There are plenty of companies that are paying heavily for that. So you actually, and we'll talk about this more and break it down, but you and I had a great conversation talking about, hey, almost how do you look into the future for what might happen and then try and prevent that and also teach your team how to do that. So you got your future goggles on, man. So I'm sure I missed plenty, Mike. I'm sure there's even better stuff in there. I know Mike calls himself a tennis prodigy. Actually, I call him a tennis prodigy. It is true. The rest of us are like trying to figure out how to play tennis. So we're like dinking and dunking it back over, and Mike's slamming it in our face. And his serve, I think, was clocked in last time at 327.2 miles per hour. Like it's pretty ridiculous. So yeah, that's fact. That's fact. It wasn't recorded, but it is fact. So, Mike, fill in the gaps, man. Can you tell me a little bit more your story, how you got to where you are? Who is Mike Christensen, man?
Yeah. So, thanks for the long introduction. No, just, it's been an interesting journey, starting out just doing technical support. I even did a short stint as in car sales for about 6 months, which I hated every moment of it. Here comes another up. Who's got it? Oh, crap. I'll go get lunch. Just kind of an interesting situation there. But just kept going through technology and learning different things. And I kept wanting to try something new. So I kept doing different things and taking a risk along the way. And that has led to where I could finally get into something that I kind of was really interested in from the beginning, which was security. And that's like years before people really talked about security. I was considering, how do you architect things to secure it a little bit better, make it more private for particular, company or an individual even at the time. So it's been really cool to get there. But along the way, doing things like sales and pre-sales and product management, and all of these things really fold into security in a great way, because a lot of people think, security, you've got to go to school and do this. But I promise that most people, just your experience in life, if you have a broad, set of experiences, it's super beneficial to understand security, because you're thinking about things like, how do people shoplift? Well, the same kinds of things happen in cybersecurity. Social engineering is the biggest way that people get, taken for their money. It has very little to do with the technical aspect. It's just the social engineering element. So that's done all the time. I mean, I remember way back when you'd see at the back of in classified ads or at the back of a magazine classified ads, and they'd be like, send $2 and self-addressed stamped envelope, and we'll send you this magical. You're going to make $300 a week or something, and yeah, let's do it. So you send it, and it's a surprise, you don't get anything back, but you gave $2 to somebody, and they're pretty happy. So I mean, that's social engineering. That's just basic stuff. So today, looking, you're talking about the forward-looking kinds of things, and how do you prepare? I mean, it's very different depending on if it's an individual or a company to some extent, because you have, they have different attack vectors or things that are important to them. So you have to look at it from that perspective. But from a global perspective, AI, which really I just call it automation because that's all it is, just renamed a little bit. Artificial intelligence, it's definitely better. Automation's better. It can kind of build on itself a little bit, and that's scary and great in different ways too. But the biggest thing there, and the thing I can get concerned about all the time, is these large language models are really, that somebody's got to protect that, and it's easy. We're already seeing in the dark web, people are developing ways to leverage ChatGPT or whatever to build malware and create, malicious kinds of attacks on different things, and it can fix itself, a little bit. That you just build in things to fix itself, and that makes it very difficult to overcome. The bad guys. So that's probably the biggest concern right now. And then how do you fight against it? And the other thing is cryptography. I can't even say the word. So it's so cryptic. But cryptography is really big. The quantum computing stuff is going to change the game there. So anything that's encrypted today, like Bitcoin, it's encrypted, and it's very difficult to completely. Really, it's almost impossible right now to break a Bitcoin, kind of transaction or whatever, apart from stealing somebody's password. So that's the best attack vector, right? But with quantum computing, that can go so much faster. So now something that would say take 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, or whatever to crack can now be cracked in, or potentially with quantum computing, be cracked in minutes. So then you have to go bigger. You have to make it even bigger. So, in order to make it harder for quantum to break it. So.
Yeah.
So the future is scary.
So everybody listening, just buckle up. Never use the internet again.
Just about
bury your passwords in the walls of your house, and even that's not safe.
Now,
but
like little robots, termite robots that go in and find your password.
Yeah, get into our walls. No, I find the whole conversation pretty fascinating, actually. So, there's multiple, there's the tech piece of your end of, hey, how do we think about our future? How do we think about the choices that we're making today? And how do we make sure we're being good stewards of that and doing the best that we can to protect ourselves, right? So that may be our personal finances. Hey, do you use LastPass? Are you using regular passwords? Are you, whatever? But that's also, that same line of thinking translates to developing your team and the people around you and yourself. Like, actually, how do you think about yourself, fortifying yourself for any of those, future coming, attacks as well? Because we all know that they're coming, both, on the internet, personally, professionally. Like, we're always going to be attacked, and thinking about, hey, how do we set ourselves up for success in that is really an interesting conversation. So I'm excited to dive into that. And before we get too far, we're going to pivot, and we're going to make and we're going to play a game. if this is your first episode, you may not know how to play this game. So we always just give the quick guidelines. Slow burn was supposed to be a fast game. Turns out it's not so fast. So we're going to give you, it's a leadership podcast. So we're going to give you two different kind of like opposing potential ideas, or a paradox, essentially. Two things that you may consider to be really important in leadership. And we're going to ask you, in a rock and a hard place, which one would you choose? And then explain why would you choose it. And we'll give you about 15 to 30 seconds for the why, and we go from there. So I'm going to kick us off with a few of these. Mike, any questions, comments, concerns before we dig in?
This is a nerve-wracking thing, watching all these different podcasts that you guys have done. And I still get nervous thinking about it, because I would, even before we ever talked about me talking with you guys, I would spend time thinking about them, and it drove me nuts. I had crazy moments. I think that I turned to drinking. It was horrible.
You're like, actually, the reason I'm on this podcast today is I've been in AA for the last 3 months because of you turds. You guys.
I'm making amends with the podcast.
That's right. That's right. This is my step there. So, well, I hope it drives you crazy. I hope it throws you off your tennis game so that, Wednesday night I can take your lunch money. That's always my hope, man. Yes, sir. Let's do it. All right. So, Mike, pick one and tell us why. What is more important to you, being or doing? The way I'm being or the way I am doing?
So to me, it's the chicken or the egg question, because you kind of have to have both. I think doing shows who you are, but being translates to you doing. So I just don't know which one. I think for me, I would probably choose a little bit of both, but I think in the end, I think the doing matters. Because you can be a great person and not get jack squat done. So I think the doing matters.
I like it, man. All right, we're going with doing. We will give you a passing grade. I won't tell you the final score until the end of this section. Number 2, what's more important, people or tasks?
I have to tell you it's people. So just for my job, I just hired a couple of people. So I am doing 2 1 week with a 1 week in between turnaround trips to France to meet the 2 people for the week that they start. So one started last week, the other one starts next week, and I'm going to make sure that I bring them on board and give them, a good starting point. So I think the people matter, because you have to, if you can't develop the relationship, I don't think you're going to get the same level of performance from those people.
I like it. All right.
But once I've done that, you better get your task done.
with the asterisks. Yeah, I've invested in you, so now you better show up. All right. A little bit in the same vein here, a little bit, but we're going to turn it. We're going to turn the corner. Relationships or results?
So I think I already answered it too, because I think they're kind of the same to me. It's I think you have to have the relationship enough to create results, because the relationship helps define, how you get to those results, and that matters. The journey almost matters as much as the end result.
I like it. All right. 273.4. Brad, should we let him continue?
Yep. You passed the first round.
Yeah. Attaboy, well, Mike. Attaboy.
Really enjoy those insights, Mike. We're going to continue on. Next question is values or vision? In leadership, what matters more, values or vision?
I think values. I think your values drive your vision. So, but I also think that, I was just looking at our documentation recently, and I start off with what is it that we hope to do, and there is a vision there. But I define how we get to that vision with the values. So without those values, we can't reach that vision. So for us, our values are really kind of like, we're customer centric. So our customers are, in my case today, our customers are not the ones we're selling to, but my colleagues that work within the company. So, however, 3,000 people or whatever, those are the customers that we're focused on, and we're trying to improve everything for them while securing it. So those values help make the bigger vision, which is to, in our case, to create security, right? So security.
Goodness
Like it.
or greatness?
This one was always easy to me, and it still is. So one thing I didn't say, I'm tennis prodigy, of course, still holding to that. But I grew up. My father was a football coach and a track coach, and I actually played. Yes, I played on one of his teams and was on his track team and stuff. But I hated track, by the way. That's why I became a tennis prodigy. But I got the opportunity to coach my kids in football. So we did flag football and tackle football. And I also coached basketball. And one of the things that I really loved was, although it was always a slightly disappointing, we would make the championship games, but we wouldn't win because there were teams that had some great players, like 2 or 3 great players, and we couldn't fully overcome that. But I took players that had never played before and got them to a championship game. And that was always the cool thing to me. So I had goodness, and I took, I think if I have a bunch of good players, I can make them a great team. If I have a couple of great players, my good guys are never going to get any better. Mm-hmm. So I think I would rather have a bunch of good guys doing good efforts because they have a better chance of being great together. Typically,
I like it.
That's great. I love the application to a team context. Culture or productivity?
So I believe in culture and leads to better productivity. So if you do it right, it's hard to cultivate it in the right way sometimes. But one of the big benefits, and Taylor and I think this was one of the things that he liked talking to me about at one point anyway, maybe not so much anymore. I don't know. But so I worked for a company that's, it's global, but we started in France. So that really changes the culture of the company. So we have a generally different view about taking your time off, like during August. You can expect people are gone maybe even the entire month in most of Europe, but especially in France. Here in the US, I mean, maybe 2 weeks, 1 week, sometimes 2 weeks. 2 weeks, it better be good because, you got to justify it, right? But the thing about that is it makes it seem like you would be less productive, and sometimes it feels that way. But if you understand the culture, you plan and you work in better ways to make sure that you open that door so people can do those things that help make them actually more productive when they return.
I like it. God, I need a month off.
I know.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that.
So why don't you guys do that, and then I'll work on increasing the podcast.
All right, deal. We'll just
membership and followers, and all that stuff.
Love it.
I don't know about the
it.
money. That one's hard. We're not charging for it, right?
That's all right. Not yet.
Hey, talking as if I'm already part of the company.
You are. You're hired. In fact, you're the CEO. We now work for you. If you can increase your sales by 600%, we work for you. That's the deal. Okay, last one, recovery or performance. So you can think tennis, you can think business, to take it anywhere you want.
I absolutely know this one because I think so around the time that Taylor and I met up in what I would call the sweating with the oldies workouts, we
I am the young one. I am the young one.
You are the youngest one. Yeah. But when I started that, I decided, oh man, I really got to do this, and I'm gonna really just own it. So I even have a gym at home, like a full on like rack of everything and all this stuff. So I was working out like 7 days a week, going crazy. And then we started playing tennis. And so I'm playing tennis and I'm doing workouts and I'm doing it and doing it. And then I think Taylor might remember we were playing tennis one day, one Friday night, and I ran up to hit a ball and I stepped and I fell down and I tore my plantar fascia. So the middle part of your foot underneath. And it ended up bruising, like it was a massive bruise across the bottom and it was horrible. And I couldn't walk. Like the next day, I crawled to the bathroom. Like I couldn't get up and walk on it. And so then I'm like, okay, I had to wait for that to kind of heal up. And then I went to a physical therapist and they're like, oh, here's your problem. You need to stretch more. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I started stretching more and that helped. But then I realized I was always sore. Like something was always hurting or whatever. And it was only in the past probably year or so I started realizing taking days off mattered. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do anything, but you have to give your body a little bit of rest. So that and sleeping, drink more water, that kind of stuff, all of that mattered. So to me, recovery is the only way that you get the best performance out of things. So you have to take time off. I mean, just in the work thing or as well, you can't work all night and be productive. There's a point where you're no longer as productive. You have to stop and say, okay, take a break, walk away, take a nap, whatever it is, and then come back. And a lot of times where you were stuck, you overcome it. So I think it's super important to have that recovery.
Those are great insights. There's this wonderful study done by Stanford where they basically demonstrate that after about 50 hours of labor per week, productivity starts to decline. And then by the time you hit 55, 60 hours, it's like completely plummets because just the human mind and body literally requires that much rest. And I think it's particularly I look forward to us really getting into this because you work for a multinational global company and you see and experience how different cultures influence leadership, but particularly in America. Obviously, Japan is very known for people literally dying due to overwork, like literally on the factory line or at their desks. Their body's just like, nope, we're done. And I think that's a fascinating phenomenon that like we actually believe that is the good life or that there is some aspect of work that is that critical that we literally work ourselves to death. Like I'm really interested in what that tells us about the state of our culture and the state of our leadership,
Yeah.
So I think that those are great insights, and I really value that. Taylor, I'll kick it back to you, but I would give Mr. Christensen here a very high score on this ladder.
I think he got 427.235. Wouldn't you say, Brad? I mean, that makes a top leaderboard there. That's pretty good. Mike.
Definitely not low score.
No, yeah, definitely not. And we won't tell you what the scale is, but you did fine. You did great, man. So
Thank you.
Brad, I totally agree. I think both of you guys have some great points on the importance of recovery. I think even like in the sports world, if you look at where that's going currently, and you want to look at somebody like a Christian McCaffrey, who Brad probably doesn't know who that is, but he plays for the Niners. Dude is a machine. But if you watch the way that he works, like he works his body so hard, he has to actively make sure that he is resting and recovering enough. So sauna work and deep massages and getting enough sleep. And the idea would be, hey, if I just keep working, I am more productive. But actually, you can actually hit diminishing returns much more quickly than you think. And I forget what it was. This podcast that I listened to years ago, and I can't quote the source, so nobody can fact check me on this. So that just means that I'm right. But it was a company in Australia that basically they said, hey, we're going to cut out the day of the week. We're going to cut out one day of the week, and we're going to expect the exact same amount of work to be done. and not add any more time. We're not going to 4 10s. We're just going to do our same 4 8s, and we expect the same amount of work to get done. And the interesting thing about it, from what I remember on the podcast, was they were saying, hey, look, like what happened was a lot of the inconsistencies before, a lot of the lack of productivity skyrocketed. People are actually more productive with less time. So the whole thought is, like we do all these things to, and help us work harder and keep going and build our businesses. And we talk about staying up all night. And sometimes that's important. You can't help it, right? I got babies. Sometimes I just had to stay up all night. You can't help it. But also there's a whole other side to the fact that I would go, if you stopped working 50 hours or 60 hours and just said, I'm committed to 40 hours this week and I'm going to get the same amount of work done, what might happen? Hey, I'm going to work out 4 days instead of 7, but I'm going to get the same amount of work done and I'm going to rest. What would happen? My guess, the assertion that I make, is you would actually be more productive, more engaged, more all those things in that time, and then actually also be more present in your rest. Might be a better way to go.
I think of too, like the Simone Biles. Was it not the Paris Olympics, but the one before?
Yep.
Where she pulled out of an event because they called it the twisties or whatever, where you don't feel comfortable, you're not sure where you are when you're spinning. And a lot of people gave her a hard time for that. And, why are you dropping out? You're supposed to be a tough person or whatever. But the reality is, if we have something that's blocking us from doing our best, we do need to take a break, or we need to, have some pause in there somehow in order to restore, sometimes restore confidence in ourselves, or to take a better approach at something. The idea of banging your head against the wall constantly is actually detrimental, and so we, so I think when we get some of those kind of high-profile people doing something like that, I think it helps us build a better idea in our head about how does work get done. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. I mean, I think if you said, hey, if I'd ask you a question, hey, Mike, is your company doing okay right now? Are you guys still operating as a company? I assert the answer is yes.
I think so.
The lights are still on. And hey, Mike, does a lot of your company take the entire month of August off?
Yes.
Yes. And so how you do that is you go, if that is the end result that we want, is people have the ability to take a month off, then we will build a company and structure it in a way that happens, right?
Yep.
It's possible. I just don't think people see that as a reality, right? Chick-fil-A is a great example where they have, what would that be? 1 day off. So 50, how many weeks are there? 54 days out of the year, they're not open compared to other quick service restaurants. 56, 52. How many weeks are in a year? 52. Yeah. Look at that. Science, right?
What?
And what? Science.
I think
science.
more mathematics there.
You guys don't know. I know these things clearly.
Oh, that's right.
Clearly.
It's not on the internet, so you can't find it.
Yeah, sure. ChatGPT, somebody hacked my ChatGPT, so my head is a hot mess. I just asked ChatGPT. They said 56. But here's the deal. They have set it up in a way where they do it in one less day. And they've said, on this day, we will just rest. That's what we're going to do. And the story that I make up is that is actually really good for their team. I think Brad and I both know the importance of that in a restaurant. A restaurant is almost never stopping. Almost never. You're up in the morning, you're up all late at night. Brad and I would finish at 2 a.m. His wife would be so mad at the time when he come home. But we got rest. So I love that. All right, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time on that. We're gonna keep going because I could stay there all day.
There's still more because you want this cultural thing. Let me give it to you.
Yeah.
Let's do it. In France, they actually have laws now that are basically the way they trim the days down. You basically have a 35-hour work week. So they essentially created a 35-hour work week by putting in some requirements for taking days off or that kind of stuff. So they've changed that. They even have, I think you can get 1 or 2 days. I forget exactly all the details, but 1 or 2 days to take care of a family member who's sick, or like a mom or dad that's sick, or a kid or something like that. And it's all built in that you have to have these opportunities, or that you have to be able to take these days, and they have to track it. So, and yet they still do obviously get some things done to maintain it, maintain the business. And so, yeah, I come back to that cultural thing, that if you're talking culture of your business needs to adjust what it does and how it gets things done in the time that you have, right? So if we're expecting that of the employees, then we should be expecting that of the business too. And that's a leadership, responsibility at that point. We have to, as leaders, then bridge that gap between the business needs this and people need this. How do we make that work in the time that we have?
Correct. What's the principle that, I can't remember, it's named after its creator, the idea that work expands to fit the time allotted getting to it. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't know what that is. I mean, maybe
it's got like a fancy name. But it was really just like if I remember correctly, it was kind of like this armchair psychology sort of approach to it. Was just this idea that somebody said, hey, if I give somebody 10 hours to manufacture this piece of equipment, it's going to take them all 10 hours. But if I say, hey, actually, I need you to do this. I need you to trim, the wasteful 20% off of that. Well, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to do it faster. What do you mean? Well, I'm actually just going to do work faster. And voila, it's done faster. Yeah. And I think that that's true in so much of our work. So much of, I think, our work too, and I love your perspective on this, Michael, as leaders can be more efficient and less inclusive of time waste.
I don't want to out myself completely on this, but I have been finding that I can get more done in less time, and I'm much better in that less time. But it throws me off a little bit, because I'm like, wow, I have to have 8 straight hours or 6 straight hours of doing something in order to justify what I'm doing is the right thing. But the reality is, I can spend an hour and a half or 2 hours and do almost like half of that, what I would have done in 8 hours before. I can do half of it in 2 hours, take a break, half hour, whatever it is, go to lunch, that kind of thing, come back, and in another 2 hours, finish. And then I can give maybe an hour or something to things that I did not expect to do, or a couple of hours if necessary. And I find that I can end up having kind of a shorter work day unless something else comes up. If somebody has an issue or something, then you can get caught up, and then you can have a 10-hour day. But that's not, it doesn't have to be that every day. So you start to find that there's kind of a balance gets created. It's almost like the universe balances everything out, over time, because it may feel like you didn't do too much or didn't spend that much time for a day or two, but then you have 2 days that are pretty busy and you're locked in for quite some time. So there's kind of, I think that balances the time part, and then also helps you keep balanced in your mind and being, I think, overall more productive.
Yeah, I love it. Brad, Tom's our producer. He's in the back. Nobody knows Tom. Tom doesn't actually exist. But if he did, he would say, hey, the principle that we're referring to is actually called Parkinson's Law, which is the idea that work expands to fill the time available for its completion, which is a fascinating idea that the work expands based on the amount of time we give it to completion. I remember, I think it's actually in The Obstacle is the Way. Ryan Holiday talks about this with Apple. He says, hey, in the creation of, what product was it? I think it was the iPhone. No, it was one of the first computers or something they had. They had a challenge and it was coming down. There was a few weeks left that they needed it to be done. And he went to this group and said, hey, we got 2 weeks to do this. And they said, we can't do it. And he said, no, you can do it. Go figure out how you're going to make it happen. And lo and behold, they did it. Oftentimes, I think it is our limited beliefs about our time and that we can't get it done that we ask for more time. But the problem with asking for more time is typically then we just take up more time to complete it. Right. And I think this principle makes perfect sense once you start thinking about, like, if you go back to college, before an exam, you have endless amounts of time before your midterm or before the final, right? You have endless time.
Absolutely.
Time is not the issue, but actually time ends up becoming the issue because the phrase is, God, I don't have enough time to study for this, right? To me, it makes perfect sense. So I think in our companies, I think what we've done in America, in some ways, it looks like we're super productive, but I wonder if we've gotten lazy.
I absolutely believe that. And I think one of my favorite principles is I think it's the Pareto's principle, which is the kind of the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the stuff that gets completed is done in with 20% of the effort kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that translates to that idea that if we have more time, then we spread that 20% out over the entire time rather than, compressing it into, a smaller window.
What are practical ways? You said, hey, you'll find a lot of our people on our team taking a month off, which I think for most companies seems like there's no way that could ever happen. I can't fathom a future in which my team can take a month off. That's not, but so how do you guys make that happen? You guys have created a culture and a space, and of course you've got a team in France, and that's kind of what they do. But what does that look like? What are some of the ways? Do other team members have to step up? What does that look like?
Yeah, there's a number of things, and I would say they're very basic. They're very kind of straightforward. But so, for example, one of the things that we do is at the beginning of the year, we create what we call a change freeze calendar. So we know that, like, at the end of the month for at least a week, and then in the quarters for like 10-ish days or so, we won't do any changes to the infrastructure. And so that way, obviously, we don't maybe interrupt the end of quarter, end of month kind of processing and stuff. And then in December, we basically have a change freeze for all of December. So we already know when we can do work in terms of when we can start to push things out. Then we have to then calculate in our head, well, August, it's going to be harder if we need lots of people involved. So that would be the months that we start to do things that fewer people in the company would need to be involved. And then in the months where we're going to have more people, we try to squeeze a lot of stuff into those moments. So it can be pretty hectic in some ways, right? But that's one, like, kind of general, the big picture part. Then the smaller picture is each individual and how do you get them to move forward. And so really the only methodology that tends to work is when you're assigning a task, depending on the level of the person, in some cases you can say, here's a project, and this project needs to be completed by, in 30 days. In other cases, you can say this project is going to be finished in 30 days. This week, you're going to complete these 3 tasks. And then that's where you get this, the start button kind of comes from there. And then there's obviously, and you have to explain this early on to some people, if there's something that changes, like if the technology, failed and we have an issue that we have to work with a vendor, okay, then that's obviously going to delay that. So we're going to change the timing. That's fine. Or somebody was out of the office that we did not expect them to be gone for that that week or something. So now that changes things. So those things can happen. So we're always a bit flexible, but we have to set time frame and say, this is the goal. And if you're not going to make it, you can't wait till that final day and say, oh, wait, I'm not going to make it. You need to start identifying. You have to be, kind of smart enough to recognize, hey, this isn't moving forward. Tell someone, hey, this isn't working the way we thought it should. And we may be delayed on this. How do we, is there something we can do? And that then is the point where teamwork comes into play, because then we have to, let's bring some people together and let's discuss who can help with this. Can anyone help with this? Maybe there's a missed concept or whatever. It's like, oh, that's how we do that. Okay, that makes sense. So really, to me, it's very simplistic. It's identify some milestones, and sometimes you have to make those milestones very short, depending on how somebody can manage a bigger project. And some people can take their whole project and define their own milestones, and you just have to work with them in that.
Yeah. The deal, though, is you're choosing to create parameters with which to operate your business on. And from the work that I do with my clients, I oftentimes, in fact, I sat down with a small business owner yesterday in the afternoon, and this is the very thing we talked about. Like, the difference between companies who are really great is that they take their goals and they translate that into a calendar that is full of commitments. And based upon those commitments and how those commitments fall across set time parameters, they actually translate those goals into realities across their year. And I find that particularly in the small and mid-market, segment of the industries that I work in, there's a really, really big, we all know what we're trying to achieve, but most operators fail to actually translate that into a workable calendar. And so I think what you're highlighting is so true to my experience around what makes teams actually successful year over year over year. And how much better is life when you can say, hey, we know that for 7 days, we're not making any changes. It's just going to be, what I would call like business as usual. And so you get to, unplug for a Friday, or you get to, take a long weekend if you're not in until Tuesday, whatever the case may be. But that predictability creates so much freedom in the life of the employee and in the culture that you're trying to create across the team. So I'm a really big fan of what you're saying, and I see that work really well in other environments, not just the one that you're into. Right?
Yeah. And when we start with the end in mind and we actually work back, I think a lot of people have the big picture, right, Brad? But you're saying, hey, let's put some hands and feet and make that really tangible. So if the goal is, hey, we want everybody to be able to have a month off, and we know that X, Y, and Z are going to happen over the course of the year, then we can start to make sure that happens, like that we can actually execute on that. I think it is interesting because I think oftentimes we try and play the game and we think that the rules are already set for the way the game is supposed to be played. In other words, okay, 8 to 5 is the deal if you're in most businesses. If you're in the restaurant business, that's 8 to 5 every day, or 8 to 8 every day. And those don't have to be the rules. Those are the rules that we choose. We choose those rules. But we can choose whatever rules we want that we believe are best for our team and our culture. And then if we actually go about executing that game plan, man, look at what that would open up. There's a whole new level of possibilities. I think our scope is just too small to believe in that this is the way to be successful, right? Where it's like, man, we could learn so much from people in other cultures and countries of the way they're doing it and being successful there. So on that, Brad, do you want to jump to, I want to ask more questions about France and leadership. Like, do you want to jump to that?
I do too. Because I think that's one of the most interesting things, Mike, that you bring to this conversation that they typically don't get to engage with people on, and that our listeners don't often hear about, which is, in America, we have a particular personality right? Our country has a particular personality, particular style with which our culture engages. And I think it stands to reason that even if we looked in, the most controversial, polarizing segments of our society, let's just use politics, for example, in this case right now, there's a great example of just the polarization of styles. It's still kind of the same thing. It's just different sides of the same coin, right? Like a highly dominant, very hard driving, no compromise, work yourself to death sort of culture. But I think that a company based in another country might be able to shed some light and some insights on other styles of leadership that we just don't get as much exposure to in our culture. So how would you say you've learned more about leadership being a part of an organization that's based in another country and is just globally oriented? I think we'd love to hear some of your insights on, how they define leadership and how that's influenced your understanding of it.
Sure. To me, it's very much like working with my kids. And I don't mean that everyone is childish, but that every kid, has a different approach to life, in their own mind, their own personality. And if you treat each kid or each employee even exactly the same way, you're going to get limited benefits out of some of them, in certain cases, right? Because they just don't respond the same way. And so in a similar way, early on, I was lucky that I had a boss that is French, but then he's now a U.S. citizen. But he's been with the company for very, very well, 25 plus years, I think. And he early on took me, as kind of aside, so to speak, and saying, okay, here's a few things just to be aware of when you're working with the French. They're going to have a view that when they start a project, they want to work through that project in their minds until they can find out the perfect answer for everything. So they will spend a lot of time finding all the possibilities, poking holes in everything that you bring up. Well, we can just do it this way, and then we'll have, but then you're going to have these problems, and then people will do this, and then that won't work. So now what? And you're kind of like, what the heck? You're like, stop just trying to find problems. We're trying to solve some, so we've solved like 2 good problems. Why aren't we just trying to move forward? And it would, so I would go home and I'd just be frustrated. What is happening with these people? They're totally blocking everything. They don't want to get anything done. And the reality is they want it to be perfect. They want to address everything. Whereas the kind of the U.S. mentality is, oh, problem, fix it. Oh, I found a problem. Here's how to fix it. We're kind of a break fix kind of mentality. It's like, oh, I'll just put that on there. I'll just take an hammer to that and some duct tape and barbed wire, and I've got it all working, right? And so that's not always great either. It can be great whenever you're trying to solve something quickly, and try to keep moving forward. It's kind of like having a spare tire. Well, don't drive on the spare tire forever. Just get to the next place where you can get a real tire. It's not meant to be your long-term tire. But in the U.S., I think we often think, oh, well, it's working now, so until it's broken, let's go do other stuff. And that's not really good long term in many cases, but we do it a lot. And the French don't believe in that. They're like, if we're going to do this, we're going to fix it and we're going to make it right. Well, the problem is that means you kind of don't move forward at times because you're still trying to figure out how the best, what is the best answer. So the benefit that I have now, and it really in part comes from, a boss that is French that understands it, but he also sees the value of the American methodology. And we're starting to, just within the IT group, we're starting to change that mentality for a lot of people. that we're starting to say, look, okay, we've got a big issue or a big thing that we need to obviously update or do something different. And this all of this includes security. So like every program I do for security is the same thing. Like, okay, I know it's going to be disruptive. So here we go. These are the things that we need to do. And what kind of use cases do you have? Oh, so it'll cause this problem, cause that problem. Well, then maybe we can implement this in a different way here. Here's an exception that we can do there. This is how we can do that. And then we start to build the program. And then we'll say, okay, if we can get 80, 90% of it, so we kind of used a little bit of that Pareto principle, right? You say if we get about 80 to 90% of it, and we can implement that, then we can have the exceptions that are only 10%, and then we can figure out how we can change the process or update a system or whatever it is so that it starts to fit into the overall process that we already have. So in some cases, we'll always have that 10% or, whatever it is that won't be able to be fixed, at least until it disappears and we never use it again. But we still got what we were looking for, which is to implement a new program or process that really benefits us, as a team or in our security or whatever.
It's interesting. I was thinking, as you were talking about kind of the differences, like America, we are like, man, we are all about speed, right? Number one.
Okay.
Like we are just all about, baby, how fast can we go? If you're Ricky Bobby, like
if you're not first, you're last.
If you ain't first, you're last, man. If you ain't first, you're last. And there's some good things. I think too often too, we just, crap on American culture. And no, there's some really good things about that. But there's also something about, the old adage was, hey, if it ain't broke, we don't need to fix it. But the truth is there's a different way to look at that. Like if it ain't broke, could it break? Right. We just want to make sure that it won't in the future. Like it ain't broke now, but could it? And, I like this story. I've been putting this on my Instagram. My wife makes fun of me because I use stickers and stuff. I don't really know how to use Instagram. But, the tortoise and the hare, man, in the story, like the tortoise always wins. Like the tortoise always wins. So going faster is not necessarily better, right? And solving problems by asking ourselves what problems could happen with this rather than just plugging and chugging is actually a really important skill to do that. And I think that there are a lot of other cultures and different ways to go about it that can be embraced. And, like you said, everybody's different. Every culture's different. Can we embrace that set of skills and have that be an additional, spot in our tool bag for everybody to win, right? Because the truth is, if we only look for problems, we're never going to move. But if we're always moving, we're always going to have problems. So there's a balance there.
I like what you're saying, Taylor. I think another word that could even push that further, and it describes what you've done in your leadership, Mike, is integration, right? You're integrating the best of what you've seen in French leadership. Well, obviously we're I'm using broad brush here, but the fact that you've been able to integrate that into the team to bring some value from maybe a more commonly held American perspective, it enhances the durability of that strategy. In my opinion, you get the best of a sustainable long-term approach and the best of a high-speed fix-it-now approach, kind of working together hand in hand. And I think that type of leadership is very effective in today's business environment.
Yeah.
I think it's reflective too of that idea that not everyone, not just as a group, but as an individual, not everyone learns the same way, manages things the same way or whatever, but you can lead them towards kind of buying into a methodology as a team to be part of as a teamwork effort, rather than, telling everybody, well, this is just how you do it. You start to figure out, oh, this person responds better this way. So how can we get them on the same page, even if they don't do it exactly the same or use the exact same tool?
Sure.
Like, I mean, honestly, I write on paper all the time, but I try to keep all my notes in like OneNote, online. And it's really difficult because I wrote something over there. I got to go get it. But if I don't write it down, I don't always remember it. And so writing is sometimes better than using, an electronic tool. And then I have some team members that are very experiential. So I have to walk them through a process and show them how it works. And sometimes even let them kind of fail at doing stuff by just saying, go and try it. And then they come back and they're like, ooh, that didn't work, did it? And no, and then why not? Let's talk about why it did that. Some people can learn that way. Others, I need to document very specific things to do or tell them very specifically how to do something. And then they can meet that goal. And, but over time, I keep pushing them towards, but now you can create this the next time. Now you can create this the next time, because you have to be self-sufficient too. It can't just, if I'm doing the work for you, then I don't need you, maybe. I don't, it's a hard thing to say in a way, but, so I want you to get to a place where you can do that. So I'm trying to encourage by saying, look, you've done it before. Try building this milestone yourself. See how you can get to that milestone on your own. And after 2 or 3 days, come and check in with me, and I'll talk to you, ask you some questions, and see if I can guide you in that direction if you need it, or maybe you'll have it. So, but it is also challenging because it's time consuming.
Yeah. The vision, right, for whatever it is, can be the same for everybody, but the execution on that, or the medium to help them get there, is going to be tailored to each individual that's coming from Taylor.
Totally.
I like to use my name in the word play there. Look at that. Well, gentlemen, I can't believe it's already been an hour. Man, that is crazy. Mike, we'll have to have you back. We had a whole list of questions we didn't even get to, so, if you make it through the next 37 episodes, it was almost my golden episode. I missed it. I guess last episode, I'm 36. That was our 36th episode. I missed it. I can't believe how could that happen? Anyway,
you didn't have ChatGPT to tell you.
Gosh, I know, but now,
all your
now I do.
For you.
Yeah, it's true. Well, gentlemen,
this is fun.
Yeah, this is great, Mike. Thanks,
so much guys.
For coming on.
I've enjoyed what you guys are doing, and I, like I was saying earlier, Brad, I think Taylor's actually gotten a little bit better, and you're the centerpiece. You make everything work. So
I do appreciate those words.
We all know it's
true. You
we
are
all
right.
know it's true. We all know it's true. Yeah, he tolerates me, and I appreciate it. It gets me. My wife doesn't have to talk to me for about an hour out of these days, and she loves it. So I think she's actually paying Brad. I think that's what's.
I hope she can't hear you through the door, because that's probably just as annoying.
Yeah, she just doesn't. She just doesn't listen to me. So probably not. But
Get the sound machine on.
Oh man, yeah. Well, all of our daily leader people out there, like, subscribe, come back for another episode, and we will see you next. Nope, you'll see us or hear us next week. Should clarify.
Get the tattoo. Get the tattoo.
Yeah, get the tat, get it shaved in your head, get the t-shirt, sign up for group coaching, do all the things.
Like, subscribe, keep your comments to yourselves.